than the Clippers.
They've had 200 coaches in the last 10 years. I think the obvious one would be Phil Jackson, but I'm going to throw one out there. How about Rudy Tomjanovich?
Oh, my goodness. It went back a little too far. It's Mike Brown. Mike Brown in 2012.
Mike Brown was the coach of the Lakers? Mike Brown was the coach of the Lakers?
There was about a 15-minute period there where, yes, he was, and that was the last time they had a better record than the Clippers. Will they this year? Let's take a look for those of you just joining us at a very
good. I'm good.
But in the fourth quarter, with under 4 minutes to play, the Clippers had an 8-point lead, and Kawhi Leonard was looking to put it away, to the delight of Steve Ballmer, the billionaire who owns the team. LeBron would finish with 18, 9 boards, 8 assists. Kawhi finished with 30 points, 6 boards, 5 assists. No Paul George, no Kyle Kuzma. Clippers get a very interesting win. And so let me phrase the question this way, because in basketball, we always project things ahead to the end.
Yes, we do.
If I told you right now one of these two teams is going to win the championship this year, which would you bet it's going to be?
Right now, this very second, I would say the Clippers. They have a much more balanced team. They're going to be able to have guys be out like you see with Paul George if someone on their bench gets hurt. I don't really think the Lakers can handle any injuries like they've had the last few years. So I think the Clippers are in a better position to go an 82-game stretch, have the best record, and positive. Doesn't mean that the Lakers can't win the title. They're probably second or maybe third, but really and truly the Clippers are the better team.
Yeah, they got 60 points the Clippers did off their bench last night, which illustrates your point perfectly. How much should we make of the fact that it was a Clipper home game, but it was a Laker crowd?
Well, I think that's something that is always going to be that way. Like when I played for the Nets for all those years, no matter how much better we were than the Knicks, and we were a lot better than the Knicks, like it was always still a
But you didn't have to play them in a playoff series, and this may happen. It'll be home games.
We did, but we swept them. So we didn't get to the 7 home games. That was the only issue because the Knicks
Will
were
it
so
matter
poor.
when these two teams play?
It will not matter because you're talking about proven guys like Kawhi Leonard. He can go on the road. You're talking about Paul George. They can go on the road and win in a hostile environment. Not even talking about being at home in a hostile environment won't be that hard.
They don't have to go on the road to be in a hostile environment. Kawhi Leonard's opening speech last night got booed out by the crowd. That's what they're dealing with. There was one ish.
They have a lot of talent, and that was one of those things. They're missing their best player, the rookie of the year, the guy that is going to average 20 plus, and they took the Toronto Raptors down in overtime, took them to overtime.
Well, let's get you there. Fourth quarter, Raptors are down 4. Pascal Siakam got his money and gets his hoop and the foul. He would score 34, 18 points, but he would foul out before the game went to overtime. In the overtime, a minute and a half to go. Raptors up by 2. How good was Fred VanVleet last year in the playoffs and again last night?
He was so good. And last year in the playoffs is what people had expected from him all year long. And so to see this carry over into the first game of the season, I know it's early, but that's what they're going to need from him.
He scored 34, and the Raptors wind up winning it by 8. So no Kawhi, no problem for Toronto for at least one night because Siakam picked up the slack. He's just the second player in Raptors history with 30 points, 15 boards, and 5 assists in a game. The only other, Vince Carter, the ageless one. But the big story around the Pelicans, of course, is the guy not playing, Zion Williamson, who undergoes the knee surgery. He'll miss the first 6 to 8 weeks of the season. His general manager yesterday was asked about the injury. Here's what he said.
The notion that this happened somehow because Zion's in poor condition is just asinine. He wasn't in poor condition when he went 12 of 13 against Utah, right? That's not what it is. He's just a very unique body type.
I wanted to bring the football guys into this conversation as well because I think it's a bigger picture topic.
Yeah, bring the smallest guy in the room here.
Here's the deal. I don't think anyone is looking at Zion and saying he's not doing everything he can to stay in shape. But I think we are looking at a guy who is 6'6" and is the 3rd heaviest player in the sport and asking the question, with his level of explosion and his size, is he always going to have problems with the knees?
Well, look, when knee problems start early, they typically go long. You look at Blake Griffin right now, out indefinitely, missed a ton of the season last year, and that's something he missed his rookie year because of a knee. And this is the closest to a physical body at a power forward that's super explosive and super strong. To me, I think Zion Williamson is going to have to change his body type. And he doesn't have to lose 25 pounds because it's mostly muscle at 19 years old, but he's got to change his body type a little bit to handle the rigors.
Again, I always say football players aren't doctors, but they're the closest things I know to them because no one knows injuries like you guys do. So, RC, when you see a guy with that frame jumping the way he does and going in the lane with reckless abandon, what do you think?
Well, I think it's more about the way he lands. It's not necessarily about the force he can generate into the ground. I think you are right. It's about body composition because he's not going to lose a lot of weight. But when you have that that type of force coming from that high, gravity is gravity, and it doesn't change per person. But when you hit the ground that way, you put yourself in susceptible positions, it's going to be tough for Zion to be any different.
Again, you're not a doctor, but would you be concerned this is a guy who is going to be hurt all the time?
I'd absolutely be concerned because he had that fluke injury at Duke, and then he's had some knee injuries since then. And also, there's no corollary. We can't compare this to anybody else because we have literally never seen an athlete like this play a game like this. So it's scary.
And imagine, like you were talking about gravity. Imagine if 280, and like rolled ankles are a common thing, but 280 pounds jumping 45 inches off the ground, landing on somebody's foot, that's something that you don't want to see, but can happen.
Look, the only two players in the NBA heavier than him are Boban and Taco Fall, who are
and they both can't jump over a taco either.
Well, they can't. But they're a combined 15 feet tall. That's the point that I'm making. This is something to be concerned about, and as I've said all year long, I hope I'm wrong. Meanwhile, tonight on ESPN, we have our first NBA doubleheader of the season. Starting 7:30 Eastern, Joel Embiid and the Sixers hosting Kemba and the Celtics, followed at 10 by Dame Lillard and the Blazers taking on Jokic and the Nuggets. Stephen A. gets it all started on SportsCenter, 7 Eastern. That's tonight on ESPN and the ESPN app. Back to the football conversation. Let's talk about the Bears, who just looked terrible Sunday against the Saints, and Mitchell Trubisky has clearly regressed on a team that had championship aspirations heading into this season, and I suppose still has them. But Sunday felt like a step back in every conceivable way. And you look at some of the numbers here, and his total QBR is third worst among all quarterbacks qualified this season. Of course, he's missed some time being injured. But this is a guy, and I almost feel bad repeating it, but I can't assume everyone knows it. The Bears traded up to take him ahead of Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson. So that's always going to be part of the equation. As you watch them play, if you were making the decisions, would you be moving on from Trubisky now?
I would try to. We've seen this story play out far too many times in football where there is a great team, a great defense specifically, failed by a bad quarterback, and the window closes and it's too late to make a move at that point. I would love for them to look to make some sort of trade. I know it's unlikely to trade for a quarterback at this point, but there's a team in my mind and a player and Ryan Fitzpatrick, who's not a great guy, but if you manage the amount that you ask from him, and I think Miami would be happy to move on from just about anybody for anything. You manage what you ask of him and you put him in a situation, he might be better than what Mitchell.
I mean, the hard part about thinking about that is you're talking about a career journeyman, a guy who you bring in for energy, a guy who you have as a backup, only competes when you know the starting quarterback isn't your guy going forward, and you're willing to say that the dude you picked over Patrick Mahomes, the dude you picked over Deshaun Watson, would be worse than Ryan Fitzpatrick. That's something that you just can't understand. But the stress that is on this great Chicago Bears defense, you lose a game to the Packers where you only give up 10 points. In the last 2 weeks, you give up 24 and 36, and you lose to Oakland and then at home to the Teddy Bridgewater-led Saints. There's only so much you can ask, and you have to get some of that play from the offense, and you have to get him to progress.
So you're right that Fitzpatrick isn't going to be a cure-all, but I don't want to get caught up in like the sunk cost fallacy where you just think about how much you committed to this guy. They have a chance to make a move, and he may not be great, but he could be better.
But this will go down to me as one of the all-time worst picks. If he can even be Marcus Mariota, he could be Jameis Winston. He will always be compared to the two dudes picked behind him, and this will be, from a bust standpoint, to me, one of the worst decisions in draft history.
I don't disagree, and unfortunately, that's sort of his lot in life. But if you're the Bears, you still have to make decisions trying to win around.
If you're the Bears, I understand what Dom is saying. You don't move on for Ryan Fitzpatrick. If you can get a guy who is an established winner in this league, a guy who you can move forward with, you do that. Right now, you have to stick with this decision and try to figure out a way. If Matt Nagy is an Andy Reid type genius, he better figure out how to make.
He's no Andy Reid.
He better figure out a way to make Mitchell Trubisky
I think the defense,
comparable to that.
The defense is not off the hook in this because if you look at the accumulation of talent that this team has, quarterback aside, they have enough talent to be a championship team if the defense plays well. Sometimes you got to look over and say if they don't score, they can't beat us. You need to put people on their back. Like I feel like we should have RJ out here because he knows about riding on people's back.
But isn't it also worth pointing out that this was a game against New Orleans this weekend that the quarterback is coming back from injury. It's a 2-point game at halftime, and the Bears had had 5 rushing attempts in the first half. 5.
No, absolutely. Listen, Matt Nagy said he wasn't an idiot because he felt like an idiot, because he understands who his quarterback is. And the reason they won last year was run game and Mitchell Trubisky using his athleticism. They've gone away from that and tried to make him play quarterback, and that ain't his thing.
As we continue here on Get Up this morning, you want to talk about running quarterbacks, maybe the greatest of all time? Coming up, Michael Vick is no longer the best ever to do this. Ryan Clark will tell you who has surpassed him. This could be controversial. And then Durant is gone. Clay is hurt. The West is loaded. Even with Steph, could we actually see playoff basketball without the Warriors? Answers to those